Tonight, let's settle in with one of the great American stories. A tale of dust, hunger, and people who refuse to give up. No need to take notes or stay sharp. This story will be here whether you drift off or stay. Just listen and let it carry you. It's called The Grapes of Wrath. John Steinbeck published it in 1939, and America has never quite recovered from reading it. Picture Oklahoma in the 1930s. The rain stopped. Then the wind came, and the sky turned the color of bruised copper. The soil that families had worked for generations just blew away. Dust piled against houses like snow. Children coughed through rags tied over their faces. Then came the tractors, not driven by neighbors but by faceless men paid $3 a day to plow through homes and histories. Into this broken world walks Tom Joad. He's young, lean, and quiet. Just out of prison for killing a man in a fight. He hitches a ride with a truck driver who asks too many questions. Tom answers carefully. 4 years in prison teaches you that. Under a dry willow tree, Tom finds a tall, thin man sitting in the shade. This is Jim Casey, a preacher who's stopped preaching. Casey used to baptize people and lead revivals. Now he can't figure out what sin even means. Maybe there's just people doing their best. Something in Casey's confusion feels honest to Tom. They walk together toward the Joad farm, and the landscape feels wrong, too empty, too quiet. Near the Joad place they find Muley Graves hiding in the dark. He lives like a ghost now, sleeping in ditches on land that was his. Muley watched them knock his house down. Stood there while the tractor pushed through his kitchen wall. Couldn't leave. Something in him broke and rooted. The tractor driver who demolished Muley's house was a neighbor's son. $3 a day, and he'd bulldoze anyone's home. That's how it worked. Tom reaches his family's place and finds it dark and crooked. The house has been shoved off its foundation. No lights, no sound, no one home. Muley tells him the family went to Uncle John's place. They're getting ready to leave for California. There's supposed to be work out west. That night, 3 men share a small fire inside the abandoned Joad house. Wind moans through cracks in the walls. Home is just a word now. Headlights sweep across the cotton fields outside. They flatten against the wall, holding their breath. Trespassers on their own land. Dawn turns the Oklahoma sky pink and gray. Tom and Casey walk through empty fields toward Uncle John's farm. Dew on dead grass catches the light. Ma Joad sees Tom first. She stops in the doorway, hands frozen on her apron. Her eyes search his face for what prison might have done. She decides he's all right. Not mean, not broken. And just like that, Ma becomes the center of this story. She holds everything together. Pa Joad stands back, thinner than Tom remembers. The dust took his crops, the bank took his land, and something in him went quiet. Grandpa's the wildest one. 75 years old, half-buttoned, cursing and laughing. He built this place from nothing and swears he'll never leave. Grandma prays over everything. Meals, sunsets, arguments. She and Grandpa bicker like a religion, but neither could survive without the other. Someone brought a handbill that says California needs 800 pickers. Good wages. Warm weather. A fresh start for anyone willing to drive west. Rose of Sharon is Tom's sister, 19 and pregnant. She and her husband Connie whisper about the future. A little house, night school, a real life. Al is 16 and crazy about cars. He picked the truck for the trip, a Hudson Super 6, and he's proud of that choice. It's a good engine. Loading day. A lifetime of possessions sorted into 2 piles. What fits on the truck and what gets burned. The fire eats letters, photographs, everything. Casey asks if he can come along. Not as a preacher, but just as a man. Ma looks at him and says there's always room for one more. The truck pulls away from the Joad land. Dust rises behind them. Nobody looks back. The road ahead is 1,600 miles of unknown. Route 66. The Mother Road. Every mile of it packed with families just like the Joads. Overloaded trucks crawling west toward the same fading promise. The Hudson's radiator boils over before they cross the state line. Al crawls underneath with a wrench, his kingdom of pistons and gaskets. At a roadside camp that first night, the Jodes meet other families. Same story everywhere. Tractored out, heading west, believing the handbills. Around the fire, stories pour out. Foreclosed in Muskogee, tractored in Salisaw, starved out in McAlester. Every family a different name, the same wound. A ragged man coming back east stops them cold. California's a lie, he says. Wages drop the minute you arrive. His family starved picking peaches. Tom shakes it off. What's behind them is gone. There's no back to go back to. The only direction that exists anymore is forward. At a gas station, the attendant stares at the loaded truck like it's a disease. You people got money for gas. His voice drips with contempt. Ma hears every word from the truck bed. Her face doesn't change, but her hands grip the sideboard until her knuckles go white. She says nothing. They cross the Oklahoma border and Grandpa collapses. His face goes slack. His mouth works but no words come. A stroke fells him like a cut tree. Casey kneels beside Grandpa and tries to pray. The words come from habit, not belief. But the grief is real. That's what matters in the end. Grandpa dies in a tent beside the road. The man who tamed wild Oklahoma prairie with his bare hands couldn't survive leaving it. The land took him back. They can't afford a proper burial. Tom digs a shallow grave by the road while Ma wraps Grandpa in a quilt. It's illegal, but it's all they have. Tom writes a note on a page torn from the family Bible. He puts it in a bottle and buries it with Grandpa. So nobody thinks we murdered somebody. The truck pulls away from the grave at dawn. Grandma stares backward through the canvas. Nobody speaks for 60 miles. Grief fills the cab like dust. Ma won't let them stop moving. She feeds the children cold biscuits and tells stories about California. Her voice is steady. Her eyes tell a different truth. Outside a town in the Panhandle, they find the Wilsons broken down. Sari Wilson is sick inside their car, and Ivy can't fix the engine alone. Without a word, Al dives under the Wilson car's hood, and Tom starts unloading supplies to share. Two families become one. That's how you survive the road. Across the Texas Panhandle, the heat is relentless. The land flattens into nothing. Windmills stand motionless. Even the wind has given up here. Tom and Al work on the Wilson car together under a cottonwood tree. Grace and sweat. Shared tools. This is how men become brothers on the road. Rose of Sharon worries about every bump in the road. The baby moves inside her, and she presses Connie's hand against her belly. He smiles, but his eyes wander. At night, Connie whispers his plans to Rose of Sharon. Night school for radio repair, a little white house. $3 a day. She believes every word. Ruthie and Winfield press their faces to the truck rail, watching the world fly past. They've never seen mountains. They've never seen anything but Oklahoma dust. Night driving through New Mexico. Stars blazing overhead thick as spilled salt. The family sleeps tangled together while the truck drones westward through darkness. In a junkyard outside Albuquerque, a one-eyed man whines about his rotten luck. Tom snaps at him. Stop pitying yourself and do something about it. That's Tom's way. Don't look too far ahead. Don't look back. Just handle what's in front of you right now. One step, then the next. At the Arizona border, uniformed men climb through their belongings. Searching for plant disease, they say. But they look at the Jodes like they're the disease. Noah Jode is the quiet one nobody notices. Tom's older brother, strange and gentle, damaged at birth when Pa panicked and pulled too hard on his head. At the Colorado River, Noah simply walks away. Says he's going to live by the water and catch fish. Tom watches him go and doesn't try very hard to stop him. The family absorbs the loss without breaking stride. Too many things have been lost to mourn each one properly. They adjust and keep driving. Grandma grows weaker every day. She calls for Grandpa in her sleep, not understanding he's already gone. Sari Wilson fades too, two women dying on the same road. Sari can't go on. The Wilsons must stop. The families that joined together at roadside now separate, and the loss feels like losing kin. Ahead lies the Mojave Desert. Everyone says cross at night or the heat will kill your engine, and maybe you too. They wait for sundown and start driving. In the truck bed, Ma lies beside Grandma through the desert night. She holds the old woman's hand and feels the grip loosen. She doesn't say a word. At the agricultural checkpoint, officers want to search the truck. Ma leans out with blazing eyes. There's a sick old woman here. You let us through right now. When they reach the other side of the desert, Ma tells them. Grandma's dead. She's been dead since the middle of the night. Ma lay with the body for hours. Think about that for a moment. She held her dead mother-in-law all night so the family wouldn't panic in the desert. That's the kind of strength we're talking about. From the mountain pass above the Central Valley, California opens below them, green and gold stretching to the horizon. The promised land, impossibly, heartbreakingly beautiful. Pa stares at it, and something in his face looks more frightened than hopeful. Maybe he senses it already. Beauty this generous doesn't give itself away for free. Grandma gets a pauper's burial. The county handles it. No family there, no prayer, no quilt to wrap her in. Just a number in a ledger. Ma's face when she hears how Grandma was buried. Set like stone. She doesn't cry. She just looks at something very far away and nods once. Descending into the valley, the orchards appear. Rows of fruit trees stretching in perfect lines. Peaches, oranges, cotton. More food than they've ever seen in their lives. But the first person they ask for work spits on the ground. Okies. You people keep moving. We don't want your kind settling around here. Okie. Tom learns what the word really means. It means you're dirty. It means you're stupid. It means your children don't matter. It means go away and starve. They camp beside an irrigation ditch that night. California's water flows past them, carrying enough to grow 1 million tons of food. They can't afford to eat. A man crouches by their fire and tells them the truth. Those handbills. They print thousands on purpose. Flood the market with desperate people, then pay nothing. Here's how the trick works. Print thousands of handbills. Bring 10 times the workers you need. When desperate people compete for jobs, wages collapse to nothing. The Jodes pull into their first Hooverville, and the smell hits them before the sight does. Sewage, smoke, rot. This is where California puts its unwanted people. Children with swollen bellies squat in the mud. Hollow eyes watching the new truck arrive. Their parents can't feed them, but they won't let them beg. Not yet. Tom meets Floyd Knowles, a lean, hard man who's been in California long enough to understand the system. Floyd doesn't waste words on hope. He deals in facts. Floyd explains the contract game. They offer work but never put wages in writing. Show up and they'll pay whatever they want. Complain and you're a troublemaker. A labor contractor rolls into the Hooverville in a shiny car. Got work picking fruit, he announces. But when Floyd asks what wages, the man's face goes cold. Floyd demands a written contract with set wages. The deputy moves forward with his hand on his holster. Asking questions makes you dangerous in California. Everything happens fast. The deputy grabs Floyd. Tom trips the deputy from behind, and Jim Casey steps in and kicks the man while he's down. Chaos erupts. Casey tells Tom to run and hide. Then he walks toward the deputy with his hands up. He takes the blame so Tom won't violate his parole and go back to prison. They handcuff Casey and push him into the back of a car. He goes quietly. But watch his face through the window. Something has crystallized in him. He knows what he's for now. That night the Hooverville burns. Deputies torch the shelters in retaliation. Families scatter into darkness, carrying children, losing everything they managed to keep until now. The Jodes flee the burning camp in the dark. The truck lurches onto the road with no destination. Behind them, the sky glows orange. Another home destroyed in 1 hour. Uncle John rides in silence. He carries guilt like a stone in his chest. Years ago his wife complained of stomach pain. He told her it was nothing. She died that night. When the guilt gets too heavy, Uncle John drinks. He disappears for a day and comes back ruined. Ma watches him the way you'd watch a cracked dam. Then they find Weed Patch. A government camp with wooden tent platforms, running water, and flush toilets. Rose of Sharon sees the showers and starts to cry. Hot water. Toilets that flush. A place to hang laundry where nobody spits on you. These tiny dignities feel like miracles after what they've been through. Weedpatch runs on democracy. The migrants elect their own committee. They make their own rules. They settle their own disputes. Nobody calls them Okies here. Saturday night there's a dance. Somebody brings a fiddle, somebody else a guitar. People who were starving yesterday are laughing and spinning under paper lanterns. But the growers want Weedpatch shut down. They send men to the dance to start a fight. If there's a brawl, deputies can raid the camp and close it. The camp men see it coming. Quietly, without fuss, they surround the agitators and walk them to the gate. No punches thrown. No excuse for a raid. Democracy defended by calm hands. Tom watches all of it. The meeting, the dance, the quiet handling of trouble. Something turns over in his mind. Regular people can do this. They just need to stick together. But dignity doesn't fill stomachs. There's almost no work near Weedpatch. The family stays clean and organized in a camp where they slowly starve. Ma counts the last of their money on the tent floor. A few coins in a worn dollar bill. Enough for rice. Maybe flour. Nothing else. The math is final. The children eat fried dough because there's nothing else. Rose of Sharon needs milk for the baby growing inside her. There is no milk. There is no money for milk. Ma cooks what little they have. But other children appear at the tent flap watching. Hollow-eyed and silent. The cruelty of eating when someone else's child is hungry. Ma feeds her family first. Then she leaves the pot on the ground for the stranger's children to scrape clean. There isn't enough for anyone, but she can't watch them go empty. One morning, Connie is simply gone. Rose of Sharon's husband walked away in the night without a word. The dreams of night school and a White House walked with him. 19 years old, pregnant, abandoned. Rose of Sharon sits in the tent and doesn't speak for the rest of the day. Ma brings her water, sits beside her, waits. Tom finds day work digging ditches. 12 hours bent double in the sun for $1. Barely enough to buy gas to drive to the next day's labor. Earn $1, spend it at the company's store where bread costs twice what it should. The system runs like a machine designed to keep you exactly where you are. Desperate. Watch Pajot in these scenes. He stands in food lines with his hat in his hands. The man who plowed his own land can't feed his own children. Something dies behind his eyes. Ma makes the decision. We're leaving Weedpatch. There's no work here and the children are getting thin. She says it with a voice that doesn't invite discussion. Pei starts to argue. Tom opens his mouth. Ma raises the jack handle, not to swing, but to say this is settled. I'm not asking. I'm telling. We go. Leaving Weedpatch hurts. The showers, the toilets, the Saturday dances. Traded for the chance of a meal somewhere up the road. Dignity doesn't fill bellies. Driving north toward Peach Country, they hear rumors on the road. Hooper Ranch is hiring. 5 cents a box. Enough to eat if the whole family picks together. They arrive at Hooper Ranch and the road is blocked. People with signs are shouting. Deputies wave the Jode truck through the line. Tom doesn't understand what's happening yet. Beyond the fence, rows of small, dirty cabins. 1 room per family. The Jodes file into their assigned space and look around. It smells like the last family's despair. First day picking peaches. Every hand works. Ma, Tom, all. Rose of Sharon with her heavy belly. Even the children carrying buckets. 5 cents a box from dawn to dark. At the end of that first day, they count their earnings. Barely enough to buy a thin supper at the company store. The math never quite works in your favor here. The company store charges double for everything. Bread, beans, coffee, all priced just high enough to swallow the day's wages. You work for the ranch and you buy from the ranch. Ma knows they're being cheated. She can do the arithmetic. But where else will she buy food? The nearest town is miles away and the family is too tired to walk it. That night, Tom can't sleep. Something about those people on the picket line nags at him. He crawls under the ranch fence and walks toward the dark orchard to find out. In a creek bed beyond the orchard, Tom finds a group of men huddled around a small fire. And there, in the center of them, Jim Casey. The preacher is back. Casey's different now. Jail changed him. He says he watched men alone in cells break, but men together in a group hold each other up. That's when it clicked. Casey explains the strike. The ranch offered 5 cents a box, then cut it to 2.5 once enough workers were inside the fence. The strikers want the original rate back. Remember Casey wondering about the oversoul? He found it. Not in church, but in working people standing together. One man alone is weak. Together there's something powerful. Then flashlight beams cut through the orchard like white knives. Boots crashing through brush. The guards have found them. Men scatter in every direction. A guard raises a pick handle and brings it down on Casey's skull. Casey's last words, "You got no right to starve people." Then his legs buckle and he falls. Tom grabs the pick handle from the ground. Something erupts inside him that goes beyond thought. He strikes the guard who killed Casey. Strikes him down, then he runs. Tom crawls back under the ranch fence with a crushed nose and blood on his knuckles. He killed a man tonight, again. He is a fugitive. Again. But this time it's different. In the dark cabin, the family sees Tom's face. Nose smashed sideways, one eye swollen shut, blood crusted on his chin. Ma reaches for a rag and warm water. Tom tells them what happened. Casey is dead, the guard is dead. If they find Tom here, it's prison for life, or a rope. The family has to decide quickly. Next morning the peach wage drops to 2.5 cents a box. The strike is broken. Casey died trying to hold the line, and the line didn't hold. Not yet. The family packs up before dawn. Tom lies hidden under mattresses in the truck bed. They have to move before someone connects his face to what happened in the orchard. Under the mattresses, Tom breathes the smell of his family's sleep. Every bump in the road jolts his broken nose. But he doesn't make a sound. He learns silence in prison. Cotton season saves them. They find work picking cotton, and for the first time in weeks, the family earns enough to eat a real meal. Meat, potatoes, coffee with sugar. The cotton camp is old boxcars beside the fields. Rusted railroad cars converted to rooms. Better than the Hooverville, worse than Weed Patch. The Jodes have stopped comparing. Tom can't show his face. He hides in the willow thickets by the creek near camp, sleeping on the ground, waiting for Ma to bring him food wrapped in cloth. Ruthie ruins everything by accident. In a fight with another child, she boasts that her brother killed a man, and he's hiding right now. Children don't understand what secrets cost. Ma goes to Tom that night. She finds him in the willows and sits down beside him. This is the conversation that changes everything. Listen carefully. Tom tells Ma about Casey's ideas, about how one soul isn't worth much alone, but all souls together make something holy. Working people connected like one living body. Tom says maybe he can do what Casey was doing. Organizing people. Helping them see that together, they don't have to take what the powerful dish out. He's going to try. Then Tom says the words that define this entire book. Wherever there's a fight so hungry people can eat, I'll be there. Wherever there's injustice, I'll be there. Ma touches Tom's face in the darkness. Her fingers trace the bruises, the crooked nose, the jaw she's known since he was born. This is goodbye, and they both know it. Tom disappears into the night. Ma watches the darkness swallow him. She stands alone by the creek for a long time before walking back to the camp. He's gone. The rains come early that year. Not gentle spring rain, but cold, relentless downpour that turns the cotton fields to mud and the roads to rivers. Work stops. No cotton to pick means no money. No money means no food. The rain that turns California green is drowning the people who pick its harvest. The cycle tightens. The creek beside the camp begins to rise. Brown water creeping over its banks inch by inch. Pa stands watching it with the dull recognition of a man who's seen floods before. Rose of Sharon goes into labor in the boxcar. Rain pounding the roof. No doctor, no hospital, no clean sheets. Just Ma and a neighbor woman, and a prayer neither believes will work. Outside, the men build a dam, shoveling mud in the pouring rain, piling earth against the rising creek. Every man in the camp works shoulder to shoulder. The water keeps coming. Al tries to start the truck. The battery is dead. Water's reached the engine block. Their only way out sits useless in rising brown water. They're trapped. A cottonwood tree crashes into the dam. The earthen wall splits open. Brown water pours through the gap and rushes toward the boxcar camp. The fight is lost. Rose of Sharon's baby is born dead, a blue still thing that never drew breath. Born in a flooding boxcar in the rain. All the dreams of a White House die with it. Uncle John takes the apple box with the dead baby. He walks to the flooding creek and sets it in the current. Go down to the town, he says. Show them what they did. Go down and tell them. Uncle John's voice cracks. Go down in the street and rot and tell them that way. The dead baby as witness. The accusation sent downstream on brown water. The water rises into the boxcars now. Ankle deep, then knee deep. The family has to move or they'll drown in the place they called home for a few weeks. Ma leads them through waist, deep water toward higher ground. She carries a blanket over her head, holds Rose of Sharon upright, and doesn't stop moving. She never stops moving. On a small hill above the flood they find a barn. Its doors hang open. Inside it's dry and dark and smells of old hay. They stumble in out of the rain at last. In the corner of the barn, a boy sits beside a man lying in the straw. The man is skeletal. He hasn't eaten in 6 days, the boy whispers. He's dying of starvation. Ma looks at Rose of Sharon. Rose of Sharon looks at her mother. Something passes between them that needs no words. Two women deciding something in silence that will define this book. Rose of Sharon asks the others to leave the barn. She lies down in the straw beside the starving man. She opens her dress. This is the last image of the novel. She feeds a dying stranger with milk meant for her dead baby. The nourishment that had no child to receive it finds a man who would have died without it. Life passes between them. That smile on Rose of Sharon's face. Steinbeck doesn't explain it. He simply describes it, mysterious and knowing, and closes the book. The rest is up to you. The novel ends right there. No happy resolution. No ride into the sunset. Just a woman in a barn, a stranger being saved, and the rain outside slowly stopping. Steinbeck could have written a triumphant ending. Instead, he chose truth. The crisis wasn't over. The migrants were still starving. A happy ending would have been a lie. The Jodes aren't heroes in the traditional sense. They're ordinary people ground down by forces they didn't create and can't control. Their heroism is simply that they endure. Now let's step back and look at how Steinbeck built this. The novel alternates between the Jode chapters and wider intercalary chapters. Brief views of the whole migration. One intercalary chapter follows a land turtle crossing the highway. Cars swerve around it. One driver tries to hit it. The turtle keeps going. That's the whole novel in one image. Another chapter shows used car salesmen preying on the departing families. Selling broken cars at double price to people who have no choice, vultures in neckties. But there's also the chapter about a roadside diner. A waitress sells bread to a migrant for a dime. The truckers at the counter leave her an extra, large tip. Kindness flows quietly. These wider chapters give the Jode's private story its public dimension. One family's suffering becomes a nation's crisis. One truck becomes a river of trucks. Something changes in the family over the course of the novel. They start out as a blood clan. My family first, everyone else second. They end as part of something larger. Tom's arc is the spine of the book. He begins as a man looking out for himself. Day by day, no big thoughts, just survive. He ends as a man willing to die for others. Casey is the novel's moral compass. An ex-preacher who lost God and found humanity. His initials are JC, and that's not an accident. Steinbeck knew what he was doing. But the strongest character is Ma. She holds the family together through sheer will. When everyone else breaks, bends, or runs, Ma stands firm and says, We go on. Pie's arc breaks your heart. He was a good farmer on good land. Take that away and he becomes a husk, a man whose purpose was stolen by a bank and a dust storm. Rose of Sharon's transformation is the most extreme. She begins as a dreamy, selfish girl full of baby plans. She ends as the novel's most transcendent figure. Anger runs through this novel like a current. Not wild anger, but the slow, righteous kind that builds when people realize their suffering was manufactured, not natural. Steinbeck warns the powerful directly in the novel. When people have nothing left to lose, the grapes of wrath are filling and growing heavy. Be afraid of that harvest. The title comes from the battle hymn of the Republic. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. Trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. Carol Steinbeck, his wife, suggested the title. She heard the hymn and knew it captured everything. The suffering, the anger, and the hope that justice would come eventually. Religion in the novel moves from organized faith to lived practice. Casey stops preaching sermons and starts organizing workers. His new church has no roof and no collection plate. The land is a character in this novel too. Oklahoma betrays the Jodes with dust. California betrays them with beauty that hides a closed fist. The earth is never neutral here. Machines are everywhere in this story. Tractors that destroy homes. Trucks that carry refugees. Cars that die in the desert. Each machine either saves or kills, depending on who controls it. The economy of suffering. That's what Steinbeck revealed. Human misery isn't an accident in this system. It's the product. Desperate people work for less. That's the whole business model. One of the intercalary chapters describes Highway 66 itself. Steinbeck turns the road into a character. A river of asphalt carrying human need westward in an endless current. The journey west echoes the book of Exodus. Steinbeck knew his Bible. A people enslaved, a promised land, a desert crossing. A leader who doesn't reach the destination. Every parallel deliberate. California is the false Eden. Beautiful beyond imagining, green and golden and generous, but only to those who already own it. For the Jodes, paradise has a barbed wire fence. Steinbeck uses children as witnesses throughout the novel. Ruthie and Winfield see everything with eyes that haven't learned to explain away injustice. Their confusion is the reader's outrage. But children are also wonder in this novel. Ruthie sees her first flush toilet and screams with delight. Winfield discovers mountains exist. Their amazement reminds us what's worth saving. The human body is never abstract in this novel. Hunger has a face, pregnancy has weight, death has a smell. Steinbeck insists you feel the physical truth of poverty. Food in this novel is never just food. Who eats, who watches others eat, who shares, who hoards. Every meal is a moral event. Every empty plate is an accusation. Remember the diner scene. May the waitress, hesitating over the candy. The migrant father asking the price. Her heart winning over her register. And the truckers silently covering the difference. Small acts of resistance pulse through the novel like a heartbeat. A waitress undercharging. A camp committee standing firm. A woman lying with a corpse to save her living family. Let's sit with that barn ending one more time. Why does it shock us? Because we've been trained to expect stories to end with victory, or at least with clear defeat. This ending is neither. Rose of Sharon's gesture works on two levels. Physically, she saves a man's life with her body. Symbolically, she transforms private grief into public generosity, loss becoming gift. This ending answers Casey's question about the oversoul. We are all one body. Rose of Sharon proves it physically. Her body nourishing a stranger's body, the theology becomes flesh. Steinbeck leaves the Jodes in the barn. He doesn't tell us what happens next. The flood hasn't receded. The system hasn't changed. The struggle continues beyond the last page. Some critics accused Steinbeck of sentimentality, of manipulating readers' emotions. But there's a difference between sentimentality and compassion. Steinbeck earned every tear in this book. Others called it propaganda. A political tract disguised as fiction. But propaganda tells you what to think. This novel makes you feel what others feel. That's art, not agenda. Listen to how Steinbeck writes. In the Jode chapters, the language is blunt and plain. Real speech, real people. In the intercalary chapters, it lifts into poetry. The contrast is deliberate. The Oklahoma dialect is perfect. Steinbeck doesn't mock it or correct it. He writes the way people actually spoke. Drop G's, regional grammar, and makes it sound like music. The intercalary chapters let the novel breathe. After the intense personal drama of the Jodes, these wider views give you a moment to absorb, to see the larger pattern, Steinbeck pacing you. Think of the novel as a piece of music. Themes introduced early return transformed later. The turtle's stubborn crossing echoes in Mai's stubborn march through the flood. Everything connects. What makes this protest literature instead of a pamphlet? Characters you love, scenes that haunt you, language that sings. The politics are inseparable from the poetry. Steinbeck makes systems feel personal. The bank isn't a building. It's a monster that breathes profits and excretes foreclosures. The tractor isn't a machine, it's an invasion force. The bank is the novel's invisible villain. Nobody to blame because no person makes the decisions. The monster feeds itself. Profit demands growth, demands eviction, demands suffering. How do you make abstract economics feel like a punch? Steinbeck shows a child watching his home demolished. He shows a mother choosing which memories to burn. He makes the macro micro. Dignity is the novel's hidden currency. When Weedpatch gives the Jodes toilets and hot water, it's not about plumbing. It's about being treated like a human being. Weedpatch represents Steinbeck's political hope. Ordinary people governing themselves with fairness and respect. Democracy not as theory but as daily practice. It works because they make it work. Each mile of the journey strips another illusion from the Jodes. California will save us. The handbills are honest. Hard work will be enough. People will treat us fairly, all false. But Steinbeck isn't hopeless. The novel refuses optimism and refuses despair in equal measure. What it offers instead is the stubborn fact that people keep going. That's its faith. Ma says it best. We're the people that live. They can't wipe us out. They can't lick us. We'll go on forever because we're the people. That's not boasting. It's a geological fact. There's a difference between surviving and living. Surviving means your heart still beats. Living means you still give, still connect, still refuse to treat another person as less than human. The women in this novel carry more than the men. Ma leads, Rose of Sharon transforms, even Grandma burns fierce to the end. The men break first, the women bend but hold. The men who break. Pa shrinks when his land disappears. Connie runs when the dream collapses. Noah walks away when the pressure builds. Each one fails at a different threshold. Tom and Casey don't break because they find something beyond themselves. Casey finds it in collective action. Tom finds it through Casey's death. They survive by expanding, not contracting. Community is survival in this novel. Isolation kills. Every character who separates from others. Mooley alone on dead land. Noah alone by the river diminishes. Connection is oxygen. Steinbeck shows how the tenant system worked. Generations of families farming land they never owned, paying rent in crops, sinking deeper into debt every year. A system built on permanent poverty. The Dust Bowl wasn't just bad luck. Decades of aggressive plowing stripped the topsoil bare. When the rain stopped and the wind came, there was nothing to hold the earth down. We did this. The migrants faced organized hostility. Local police harassed them. Growers hired goons. Newspapers called them lazy parasites feeding off the state. Sound familiar? The labor movement runs through the novel like an underground river. Casey organizes. Tom inherits the mission. The strikes fail in the short term, but plant seeds that take decades to bloom. Casey's initials are JC. He sacrifices himself for others. His teachings are carried forward by followers. He dies at the hands of authority. The parallels are as clear as Steinbeck intended them. Religious imagery saturates the novel without ever becoming preachy. Baptism in the river. Exodus across the desert. The barn as manger. Steinbeck weaves the sacred into the secular. The Journey West is the oldest American story. Pilgrims, pioneers, gold rushers, Okies. Every generation sends its desperate toward the sunset, chasing the same promise of reinvention. What makes the Jodes universal is their specificity. They're not symbols. They're a particular family with particular hands and particular voices. That's why you care about them. Steinbeck builds compassion in the reader piece by piece. He doesn't start with the worst suffering. He starts with a man walking home, a family packing a truck. Then slowly he tightens the vise. Certain scenes burn into memory. Ma lying with Grandma's body, Casey's last words, the dead baby floating downstream, Rose of Sharon's smile. Steinbeck builds these moments from sensory detail. The truck is almost a family member. The Hudson Super 6 that carries their entire world on its back, groaning uphill, steaming in the desert, breaking down and being coaxed back to life. Al's love for the truck is one of the novel's tender threads. He chose it, he maintains it, he knows its sounds and moods. His mechanical skill is the family's lifeline. Animals carry symbolic weight throughout. The turtle crossing the highway. Dogs abandoned at the farm. Horses sold for nothing. Each creature mirrors the human displacement happening alongside it. Dust itself is the novel's first antagonist. It coats everything. It fills lungs. It buries fences. It turns the sky the color of dried blood. And it drives everything that follows. The novel begins with drought and ends with flood. Steinbeck bookends the story with natural destruction. First too little water, then too much. The earth punishing from both directions. The flood carries biblical weight, judgment, cleansing. The old world washed away. But unlike Noah's flood, there's no ark big enough and no dove returning with an olive branch. Just a barn. The dead baby floating downstream is the novel's most devastating image. Uncle John sending it toward the town as evidence. Go show them. This is what they did to us. Now let's talk about the man who made all this. Steinbeck didn't imagine the migrant crisis. He went and lived in it. He slept in the camps. He saw the hunger with his own eyes. Tom Collins ran the Weed Patch Camp, the real one. He and Steinbeck became friends. Collins showed him how migrants organized, how they governed, how they kept their dignity against all odds. Before the novel, Steinbeck wrote newspaper articles about the camps. 7 pieces for the San Francisco News in 1936. Raw reporting that showed America what was happening in its own backyard. Publishing this book took courage. Steinbeck knew the growers would come after him. He knew powerful people would try to destroy his reputation. He published it anyway. The novel came from real suffering and real witness. Not from a library or an archive, but from Steinbeck's own boots in the mud, his own eyes on the hungry children. That's why it lasts. So who was John Steinbeck? Let's meet the man behind the novel. Born in a small California town, he grew up surrounded by the land and people he'd spend his life writing about. Salinas, California, 1902. His father was the county treasurer. His mother was a schoolteacher. A comfortable life, not rich, not poor, solidly middle class. Young Steinbeck was restless in school but hungry for stories. His mother read him Arthurian legends. He fell in love with language before he could write it properly himself. As a teenager, Steinbeck worked on ranches in the Salinas Valley. He bucked hay, picked fruit, worked alongside migrant laborers. These were the men he would spend decades writing about. He went to Stanford University but couldn't settle down. Attended classes on and off for 6 years without graduating. He wanted to write, not study. The institution couldn't hold him. Worked as a laborer, a reporter, a bricklayer's assistant. Wrote stories at night that nobody wanted. Every manuscript came back rejected. The city didn't need another dreamer. He came back to California. Moved into a cottage his father owned near Pacific Grove. Lived on almost nothing and wrote every day. The sea mist crept in and the stories crept out. Tortilla Flat came out in 1935 and people actually bought it. Funny, warm stories about the Pisanos of Monterey. Steinbeck finally had an audience. He was 33 years old. In Dubious Battle followed in 1936. A strike novel set in the fruit orchards. Darker, angrier. Steinbeck was finding his political voice, and it was pointing toward the people at the bottom. Then Of Mice and Men in 1937, George and Lenny and the Dream of a Little Farm. It made Steinbeck famous overnight. America fell in love with his voice. In 1936, the San Francisco News sent Steinbeck to the migrant camps to write a series of articles. What he saw there changed him. It was the moment the novelist met his subject. He saw families starving in the richest agricultural region on Earth. Children dying of malnutrition, surrounded by orchards heavy with fruit. The obscenity of it burned into him. The anger built inside him like pressure in a closed system. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't weather. This was people choosing to let other people starve, because it was profitable. His first attempt was a satirical novel he called El Affaire Lettisberg. He wrote it fast and angry. Then he read it, recognized it was bitter and artless, and destroyed the entire manuscript. He started over. This time not with rage but with compassion. Not a satire but a story. Not an argument but a family. The Jodes were born from this second, wiser attempt. He wrote the novel in roughly 100 days during 1938. 5 months of sustained fury and compassion. He worked every day, often making himself physically sick from the intensity. His wife Carol suggested the title. She heard the battle hymn of the Republic and knew those words. The grapes of wrath contained everything: anger, justice, divine reckoning, and harvest. The writing took everything out of him. He lost weight. His handwriting deteriorated. Some days he could barely lift the pen. But he kept going because the migrants were still out there starving. The Grapes of Wrath was published in April 1939. It hit the country like a thunderclap. Within weeks, everyone was talking about it. Within months, it had changed the conversation entirely. It sold over 400,000 copies in its first year alone. In the middle of the Depression, people who could barely afford bread bought this book. It spoke to something they needed to hear. The California growers were furious. They called Steinbeck a liar, a communist, a traitor. The Associated Farmers Organization launched a campaign to discredit him and destroy the book. The Associated Farmers published their own counter-report, calling the novel exaggerated and irresponsible. They hired detectives to dig into Steinbeck's personal life. The backlash was organized and vicious. Oklahoma Congressman Lyle Boren stood on the House floor and denounced the novel as a vulgar lie. He said it insulted every decent citizen of his state. The political world took notice. They burned the book, literally. Communities organized public burnings of the Grapes of Wrath. Libraries banned it. Schools pulled it from shelves. The truth was too dangerous to let people read. But the truth backed Steinbeck up. Congressional investigations confirmed the conditions he described. The La Follette Committee found exactly what the novel showed: exploitation, starvation, violence. Eleanor Roosevelt visited the camps herself and said publicly that Steinbeck had told the truth. The First Lady's endorsement made the denials harder to sustain. Reality was on the novel's side. In 1940, the novel won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. The literary establishment had spoken. Whatever the growers said, this was art of the highest order, and it was true. John Ford turned the novel into a film that same year. Henry Fonda played Tom Joad, and his face became the face of Depression-era America. The story reached millions more. The film changed the ending to be more hopeful. Hollywood wanted uplift. Steinbeck's barn scene was too raw, too ambiguous. But even the softer version carried enormous power. After the novel's success, Steinbeck went to war. He served as a correspondent in World War II, writing dispatches from North Africa, Italy, and England. The writer became a witness again. After the war, Steinbeck returned to Monterey and wrote Cannery Row. Lighter, funnier, gentler than Grapes. But the same compassion for ordinary people runs through every page. East of Eden came in 1952. His most ambitious novel, the Cain and Abel story retold in the Salinas Valley. Steinbeck considered it his masterwork, the book he'd been building toward all his life. In 1962, Steinbeck received the Nobel Prize in Literature, the highest honor a writer can receive. He accepted it with characteristic honesty about the writer's duty to humanity. In his acceptance speech, Steinbeck said the writer's duty is to celebrate humanity's capacity for greatness of heart and spirit, to fight against despair, to declare that people can be better. Not everyone applauded. Some critics called the Nobel a mistake. They said Steinbeck was sentimental, unsophisticated, popular but not great. The literary establishment never fully embraced him. Steinbeck's answer was always the same. He wrote for people, not for professors. If the migrants understood his book, if the working families saw themselves in it, that was enough. In 1962, Steinbeck drove across America with his poodle Charlie. He wanted to see the country again with fresh eyes. The trip became a book, part travel memoir, part elegy for a changing nation. The Vietnam War years complicated Steinbeck's legacy. He supported the war publicly, which alienated many of the same people who loved his earlier political compassion. It was a painful contradiction. John Steinbeck died in New York on December 20, 1968, heart failure. He was 66. His ashes were returned to Salinas, to the valley where everything started and everything was set. Now let's look at the world the novel describes. The Dust Bowl. What actually happened on the Great Plains in the 1930s? The answer starts with grass. For thousands of years, deep-rooted prairie grass held the topsoil in place. Then settlers plowed it under to plant wheat. Millions of acres stripped bare. When the rain stopped, the soil had nothing to hold it. April 14, 1935, Black Sunday. The worst dust storm in American history rolled across the plains, a wall of darkness 3,000 feet tall, blotting out the sun at noon. Banks foreclosed on farms that couldn't produce. Tractors came to consolidate the small holdings into large ones. Families who'd lived on the land for generations were pushed out with nowhere to go. An estimated 2.5 million people left the Plains states during the 1930s. The largest internal migration in American history, an entire region emptying out. Route 66 was the escape route. 2,400 miles from Chicago to Los Angeles, the only highway that ran the full distance to California. Every mile of it packed with the displaced. California didn't welcome them. Local police turned migrants back at the border. Towns posted armed guards. The word Okie became a weapon, a slur that meant subhuman, unwanted, disposable. The Farm Security Administration built camps like Weed Patch, modest but decent. Running water, sanitation, self-governance. Proof that the government could treat people with dignity if it chose to. Dorothea Lange photographed the migrants with her camera, the way Steinbeck wrote about them with his pen. Her image of a worried mother with 2 children became the face of the Depression itself. Woody Guthrie walked the same roads and sang about the same people. His songs turned the migrant experience into music that the migrants themselves could sing back. Art as mirror and megaphone. The Dust Bowl changed America permanently. New soil conservation laws, new farming practices. New understanding that the land isn't just a resource. It's a living system that can be killed by greed. The grapes of wrath didn't just describe a crisis. It changed how America responded to it. Laws were passed. Camps were built. Consciences were stirred. A novel moved the machinery of government. Congressional hearings on migrant conditions cited the novel directly. Lawmakers held up Steinbeck's fiction as evidence. When has a novel ever been entered into the congressional record as testimony? The seeds Steinbeck planted took decades to bloom. The farm workers' movement of the 1960s grew from the same soil. Migrant laborers organizing, demanding dignity, refusing to be invisible. California was forced to acknowledge what the novel had revealed. Labor protections, housing standards, wage regulations. Slow changes, incomplete changes. But changes that started with a book. Where does the novel stand in American literature? Right at the top. Alongside Moby Dick and Huckleberry Finn and Beloved. Among the books that define what this country is and what it's done. People compare it to Uncle Tom's Cabin. Both books showed a comfortable nation the suffering it was causing. Both were attacked as propaganda. Both changed the moral landscape permanently. Later American writers grew in Steinbeck's shadow, whether they acknowledged it or not. His insistence that literature should witness ordinary suffering influenced generations of novelists after him. The novel has been translated into dozens of languages. Wherever people face displacement, from war, from poverty, from environmental collapse, the Jodes speak in the local tongue. Their story crosses borders. It remains one of the most taught novels in American high schools and universities. And one of the most banned. The same book, doing both jobs simultaneously. That tells you something about its power. Why does it keep getting banned? The language is rough. The ending disturbs people. The politics makes them uncomfortable. But mostly it gets banned because it still makes people feel things they'd rather not feel. Henry Fonda's Tom Joad defined the character for millions of people. Lean quiet, those watchful eyes. He brought the novel's moral center to life on screen with devastating simplicity. The "I'll be there" speech in the film is one of cinema's great moments. Fonda's face half in shadow, telling Ma he'll be everywhere. Wherever there's a fight, wherever there's injustice, it still raises goosebumps. Stage adaptations brought the story to live theater. The Steppenwolf Theater production in Chicago stripped the novel down to its emotional bones. Actors, a few props, and Steinbeck's words filling the room. Woody Guthrie wrote a ballad about Tom Joad that compressed the whole novel into 17 verses. Sung with a flat Oklahoma voice and a battered guitar, it carried the story to people who'd never open a book. Decades later, Bruce Springsteen recorded The Ghost of Tom Joad, updating the story for a new generation of dispossessed. Factory closings, border crossings, tent cities, the names changed, the story didn't. Every generation finds its own Joads. The faces change, the accents shift. But the pattern repeats. People displaced by forces beyond their control, despised by those who benefit from their labor. When the 2008 financial crisis hit and families lost their homes to foreclosure, people reached for the grapes of wrath again. The novel's sales surged. Steinbeck's depression spoke to a new one. Climate refugees today echo the Dust Bowl migrants exactly. People driven from their land by environmental catastrophe, moving toward places that don't want them. The grapes are still growing. The Joads were American citizens moving within their own country. And still they were treated as invaders. That truth resonates with every displaced person everywhere who discovers borders are about power, not geography. The novel's critique of corporate power has only grown sharper with time. The faceless banks and absent landlords Steinbeck described have become larger, more distant, more powerful than he ever imagined. Steinbeck believed democracy worked when people participated. Weedpatch proves it. The Hoovervilles show what happens when people are excluded. Not just poverty, but the loss of the self. Ma Joad was a feminist icon before the word was common. She leads not by demanding power, but by being the one who never stops functioning. When the men freeze, Ma moves. The novel asks hard questions about masculinity. Pa defines himself by his land. Lose the land, lose the man. Tom defines himself by action. He survives by adapting. Casey redefines manhood entirely as service. The environmental message couldn't be clearer. Treat the land as a commodity and it turns to dust. Take more than it can give and it will take everything back. The earth keeps score. Steinbeck's greatest tool was empathy. He didn't argue for the migrants. He made you feel like one. After reading this book, the migrant's hunger is your hunger. That's what literature can do. Some readers resist the novel. It demands something uncomfortable. It asks you to sit with suffering and not look away. It asks whose side you're on. Not everyone wants to answer that question. The novel refuses easy answers. No hero rides in. The system persists. The rich stay rich. The poor keep struggling. Steinbeck trusts you enough to give you the truth, without wrapping it in ribbon. But within that refusal of easy hope, there is hope. The people endure. They connect. They give what they have. Rose of Sharon smiles. Ma keeps walking. Tom goes into the dark to fight. Reading the novel today, hits differently depending on what you've lost or feared losing. If you've moved, if you've been hungry, if you've felt invisible, the Jodes are already your family. The novel works as a mirror. It shows you who you are by who you identify with. That's not comfortable, but it's valuable. Great literature always is. Are you Tom, who fights back? Ma, who holds everything together? Rose of Sharon, who gives when she has nothing? Or are you Connie, who runs when it gets hard? The novel asks. Only you can answer. At its core, the novel asks one question. What do we owe each other when everything falls apart? Not in theory. Not in philosophy class. In the mud. In the flood. When the baby is dead. Steinbeck's answer is clear. Everything. We owe each other everything. Not because it's practical or efficient, but because that's what makes us human instead of just alive. The power of specific stories about specific people. That's what lasts. Not the statistics of the Dust Bowl, but the Jodes loading their truck. Not the economics, but Ma's face when she decides to go on. The Jodes matter a century later because the forces that destroyed them never went away. Banks still foreclose. Workers are still exploited. Families still lose everything through no fault of their own. The grapes of wrath are still growing heavy on the vine. That's Steinbeck's warning. When enough people are pushed far enough, something will break. It always does. History guarantees it. What can we learn from Mai's strength? That the center holds when someone decides it will. Not because it must. Not because it's easy. Because someone plants their feet and says not today. What can we learn from Tom's awakening? That individual pain can become collective purpose. That one man's anger is just anger. But many people's anger together is a movement. Casey taught him that. What can we learn from Rose of Sharon's gift? That the most broken person can save another. That loss doesn't have to make you smaller. It can make you larger than you ever imagined. The Grapes of Wrath is not just a novel. It's a piece of America's soul committed to paper. The best and worst of the country, held in one story, told with one voice and still echoing. We're drawing the evening down now. The story's been told. The history's been shared. Let's just sit with it a while and let the quiet settle around us. We started this evening with dust, with cracked Oklahoma earth and a man walking home in a cheap suit. Remember that? Tom Joad on that long straight road, not knowing what was coming. He walked out of prison into a world that had been dismantled while he was locked away. The farm gone. The neighbors scattered. Even the land itself had changed, turned dry and hostile. His family had already lost the land. They just hadn't left yet. They were holding on to the edge of a cliff that had already crumbled beneath their fingers. Think about what it means to leave the only home you've ever known. Not for adventure, not for opportunity. Because staying means dying. That's not a choice, that's a sentence. The truck loaded with everything you can carry. Mattresses, pots, photographs that will soon be ash. And you know it's not enough. You know you're leaving more behind than you're taking. Mile after mile of Route 66, the heat, the breakdowns, the campfire conversations with strangers who share your exact wound. Hope and gasoline both running low but never quite empty. Grandpa who couldn't survive the leaving. The fierce old man who built a life from raw prairie, rooted so deep that pulling him free killed him. The old world dying on the road west. Ma lying beside Grandma's body through the desert night. Holding a dead woman's hand so the living could keep moving. Love expressed as endurance. Can you feel that? The strength it took. Arriving in the golden land and finding it full of thorns. California so beautiful it hurt to look at. And every door closed. Every face hostile. The promised land with its fists up. The word Okie. How a two-syllable name can strip you of your humanity. Make you something less than a person. A problem, a pest. Something to be managed and moved along. But they kept going. That's what matters tonight. They lost Grandpa and Grandma. They lost Noah and Connie. They lost the truck and the baby. And still they kept going. That's the Jodes. Casey found something worth dying for. The connection between all living people. One big soul, he called it. Not religion exactly. Something simpler and harder. Just the truth that we need each other. Tom carried that forward into the darkness. Wherever there's a fight so hungry people can eat, he said. Wherever somebody's being beaten down, look for me, I'll be there. And Rose of Sharon, who lost everything, husband, baby, home. Every dream she'd whispered into the dark. Gave everything she had left to a stranger who needed it more. That mysterious smile. Not happiness. Something deeper, the recognition that giving is the last freedom. When everything else has been taken, you can still choose to give. Nobody can take that. Steinbeck trusted us with that ending. No explanation, no moral wrapped in a bow. Just the image, a woman, a stranger, a barn, and the rain easing outside. He believed we'd understand. A woman nursing a stranger in a barn during a flood. What more is there to say about what people are capable of? What more does any book need to prove about the human heart? Let that image settle behind your eyes as you rest. The barn, the hay. The rain stopping. The quiet that comes after a long storm. Stay with it. The rain outside that barn. The quiet. The simple act of giving. Maybe that's what this whole book comes down to. One person deciding that another person matters enough to save. Maybe that's what all great books are about, in the end. What we choose to give when we have nothing. Who we choose to be when no one's watching. The smallest decisions that reveal the largest truths. Steinbeck once said he wrote this book for hungry people. Not metaphorically hungry, actually hungry. People whose children had swollen bellies and hollow eyes. He wrote it for them. Not for awards or fame, or to prove himself right. Because people were suffering and somebody had to bear witness. Somebody had to say, this is happening and it's wrong and we can't look away. And the book worked. It changed things. Laws were passed. Camps were built. People saw what was happening and demanded better. A novel changed the actual world. That's rare. That's real power. Not all stories have that kind of power. But this one does. Because it's true. True in its facts and true in its heart. And the truth in a story is what lets it outlive its century. True in its facts. True in its heart. That's what Steinbeck gave us. A story you can trust. A story that doesn't lie to make you comfortable. And that, somehow, is the most comforting thing of all. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying this long. An hour with the Jodes is an hour well spent. They're good company, even when their story is hard. And if you drifted off somewhere along Route 66 with the Jodes, that's perfectly fine. That's what we're here for. The story will wait. It's been waiting since 1939. It's patient. The Jodes would understand. They knew the value of rest when you can find it. Between the day's labor and tomorrow's road. You take what sleep the night will give you. Tomorrow the road goes on. The truck needs fixing. The family needs feeding. There's always another mile and another meal to find. But tonight everything is still. The rain has stopped. The water is going down. Somewhere in a barn on a hill, a woman smiles and a stranger lives. And the sky is clearing, star by star. In the barn, a woman smiles. A stranger lives. And that's enough. For Steinbeck, for the novel. For tonight. That's enough. That's enough for tonight. Let the Jodes rest. Let Ma sleep. Let Tom walk his road in the dark. Let Rose of Sharon smile. They've earned their peace and so have you. Sleep well. We're the people that live. They can't wipe us out. They can't lick us. We'll go on forever, Pa, because we're the people. Good night. Good night.